Kelly Garrison's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the rental quote on her laptop screen. $3,000 for a single evening at Boston Harbor View, the perfect venue for her brother Mark's rehearsal dinner, but far beyond what she had budgeted. With only 6 weeks until the wedding, options were dwindling fast. She massaged her temples and took another sip of her now cold coffee when her phone rang. "Kel, please tell me you've worked your event planning magic." Mark's voice came through, sounding both hopeful and anxious. "I'm working on it," Kelly replied, minimizing the venue's website. "The harbor view is stunning but too expensive," Mark finished. "Story of this entire wedding. Listen, my best man just flew in from London. Maybe he'll have some ideas. He knows practically everyone in Boston." Kelly raised an eyebrow. "The mysterious best man you've barely mentioned. What was his name again?" "Jackson Xavier," Mark said. "We roomed together at Dartmouth before he moved abroad to run his family's shipping business. He's back stateside now. Actually, he's hosting a dinner tonight and insisted I bring you along. Says he wants to meet the sister I've been bragging about. Mark, I have a dozen calls to make about this dinner, which is exactly why you should come. Jack's connected and he offered to help. 7 o'clock at Ostra. Wear something nice." Before Kelly could protest further, Mark had hung up. She sighed, looking at her to-do list. The rehearsal dinner was just one of many wedding-related responsibilities she'd taken on to help her brother and future sister-in-law, both surgeons with brutal schedules. Between running her own event planning business and coordinating their wedding, Kelly barely had time to breathe, let alone primp for a fancy dinner with strangers. Still, connections were currency in her business. If this Jackson person could actually help secure a venue, it would be worth the detour. Kelly arrived at Ostra 10 minutes early, smoothing the front of her emerald dress as she stepped inside. The maitre d' led her to a private dining room in the back, where her brother was already seated with a dark-haired man whose back was to her. "Kelly," Mark stood to greet her with a hug. "You're just in time. Jack was telling me about a property he just acquired." The man turned, and Kelly felt her carefully constructed composure slip. Jackson Xavier was not what she had expected. Tall with broad shoulders, he had piercing blue eyes that contrasted with his olive complexion and dark hair. His tailored navy suit suggested money, but it was the warmth in his smile that momentarily disarmed her. "The famous Kelly Garrison," he said, standing to shake her hand. His voice carried the slightest hint of an accent she couldn't place. "Mark's been telling me about your event planning prowess for years." "All good things, I hope," Kelly replied, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach as his hand enveloped hers. "Exceptional things," Jackson replied, his gaze lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary. "He says you can work miracles with impossible deadlines and difficult clients." "Speaking of difficult," Mark interrupted, "we still haven't found a venue for the rehearsal dinner and we're down to the wire." Jackson released her hand and pulled out a chair for Kelly. "I might be able to help with that. I recently purchased the Beacon Hill Manor as an investment property. The restoration is nearly complete, and the gardens would make a spectacular setting for a dinner." Kelly's eyes widened. The Beacon Hill Manor was a historic estate that had been privately owned for generations. "That's incredibly generous, but we couldn't possibly consider it my wedding gift," Jackson insisted. "The place has been sitting empty while we finish the renovations. It would be good to see it used for a celebration before it goes on the market." Mark looked like he might burst with excitement. "Jack, that's perfect," Kelly finished, professional instincts kicking in. "But I'd need to see it first, assess what we'd need for rentals, catering, logistics." "Of course," Jackson nodded. "How about tomorrow morning? I can give you a tour and you can determine if it will work for your vision." As they ordered dinner, Kelly studied Jackson Xavier with growing curiosity. He spoke knowledgeably about wine, deferring to the sommelier but asking questions that revealed a genuine interest rather than pretension. When the conversation turned to Mark's fiancée Deanne's medical research, Jackson asked intelligent questions that showed he'd done his homework. "So, Jackson," Kelly said as their main courses arrived, "Mark mentioned you run a shipping business." A shadow crossed his face so quickly she almost missed it. "Xavier Maritime, yes. My father built it from a single vessel to a global fleet. I took over 5 years ago when he retired." "Jack's being modest," Mark interjected. "Xavier Maritime is one of the largest private shipping companies in the world. He's practically rebuilt the company since taking over." Jackson smiled politely but redirected. "It's hardly dinner conversation." "I'm more interested in hearing about your event planning business, Kelly. Mark says you've built quite a reputation in Boston." For the next hour, Kelly found herself engaged in one of the most stimulating conversations she'd had in months. Jackson asked about her business model, her most challenging events, her long-term goals, not with the detached politeness of small talk, but with genuine interest. When she mentioned struggling with expansion, he offered insights about scaling businesses that were both practical and thoughtful. By the time dessert arrived, Kelly had almost forgotten her initial reservations about the evening. The three of them laughed over Mark's college mishaps, with Jackson revealing a self-deprecating humor that softened his otherwise intimidating presence. As they prepared to leave, Jackson handled the check with a discretion that made Kelly suspect the bill was substantial. Outside, as they waited for their cars, he turned to her. "I'll text you the address for tomorrow. Is 10 o'clock convenient?" Kelly nodded. "Perfect. Thank you again for dinner and for considering the manor for the rehearsal." "It's my pleasure," he said, eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. "Mark's like family." After Jackson departed in a sleek black Aston Martin, Kelly turned to her brother. "You could have warned me." "About what?" Mark asked innocently. "That your best man is not only a millionaire but looks like he stepped out of a magazine." Mark laughed. "Would it have changed anything?" "I might have worn my better shoes," Kelly muttered, looking down at her sensible heels. "Trust me, Jack doesn't care about shoes. He cares about substance." Mark gave her a knowing look. "And for what it's worth, he seemed impressed by yours." Kelly rolled her eyes. "Don't start playing matchmaker. I have a business to run and your wedding to help plan. Romance is not on my agenda." But as she drove home, Kelly found herself replaying moments from the evening, the way Jackson listened attentively when she spoke, the intelligence behind his questions, the gentleness in his smile that contrasted with his powerful presence. For the first time in longer than she cared to admit, Kelly felt a spark of something that had nothing to do with professional networking. The next morning, Kelly navigated her compact Honda through the wrought iron gates of Beacon Hill Manor. The estate was even more impressive than its reputation suggested, a magnificent Georgian mansion set on 5 manicured acres within the city limits, somehow secluded despite its urban location. Jackson was waiting on the front steps, dressed in dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt, looking more relaxed than he had at dinner. He greeted her with a warm smile that did nothing to calm the inexplicable nervousness she felt. "Right on time," he said, coming down to meet her. "Ready for the grand tour?" The next hour was a revelation as Jackson led her through the manor's elegant rooms and sprawling grounds. The property was clearly in transition, some areas freshly renovated, others waiting their turn, but even the unfinished spaces held immense potential. "The previous owners let the place fall into disrepair," Jackson explained as they walked through a sunroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a garden. "My restoration team has been working for months to preserve the historical elements while modernizing the infrastructure." "It's extraordinary," Kelly said, already mentally arranging tables in the space. "Why would you sell it after putting so much work into it?" Something flickered across Jackson's face. "I travel constantly for work. It doesn't make sense to keep a property this size when I'm rarely in one place long enough to enjoy it." They continued to the gardens, where Kelly could immediately envision the rehearsal dinner taking place. A stone terrace overlooked a fountain and rose garden that, while dormant now in early spring, would be spectacular by summer. "This would be perfect," she said, gesturing to the terrace. We could set up a tent as a contingency for rain, but if the weather cooperates, dinner under the stars with string lights in these trees would be magical. Jackson watched her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. You see it all immediately, don't you? The possibilities. Kelly nodded, slightly self-conscious. Occupational hazard, I can't walk into a space without mentally transforming it. It's a gift, he said simply. Being able to envision what others can't see yet. They spent another hour discussing logistics, power sources, catering access, restroom facilities. Jackson had answers for everything, sometimes texting his contractor in real time for specifics. By the time they returned to the front of the house, Kelly had filled several pages of her notebook. So will it work? Jackson asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice that surprised her. It's perfect, Kelly admitted. Almost too perfect. Jackson, I have to ask, why are you doing this, offering your property, helping with the planning? Mark is lucky to have you as a friend, but this goes beyond normal best man duties. Jackson leaned against the stone balustrade, considering her question. Mark was there for me during a difficult time in my life. When my father died suddenly, I had to step into his role at Xavier Maritime with no preparation. Mark flew to London and stayed for weeks, helping me navigate the initial transition. I missed his residency graduation because I was dealing with a company crisis. This is a small way to make up for that. Kelly was touched by the sincerity in his voice. He never mentioned any of that. He wouldn't. Mark's not one to advertise his good deeds. Jackson straightened and checked his watch. I have a meeting in 30 minutes downtown. Do you have everything you need for now? More than enough, Kelly assured him. I'll put together a preliminary plan and budget by tomorrow. Excellent. And Kelly, he hesitated, looking suddenly less certain than the confident businessman she'd observed thus far. Would you have dinner with me tomorrow night, not about the wedding or the venue, just dinner? The directness of his invitation caught her off guard. You can say no, he added quickly. I understand you're busy with the wedding plans and your business. Yes, she said, surprising herself. I'd like that. His smile made her glad she'd accepted. I'll pick you up at 7. On the drive back to her apartment, Kelly tried to make sense of her feelings. Jackson Xavier was exactly the type of man she typically avoided, wealthy, powerful, undoubtedly used to getting what he wanted. Yet there was something genuine about him that defied the stereotype. The care he took with the manor's restoration, his loyalty to Mark, the flashes of vulnerability beneath his composed exterior, all suggested a complexity that intrigued her. Still, she reminded herself as she parked outside her modest apartment building, people like Jackson Xavier lived in a different world. Whatever attraction she felt was likely temporary and certainly impractical. Kelly spent the rest of the day alternating between client calls and sketching plans for the rehearsal dinner. By evening, she had a solid concept that would transform the manor's terrace into an elegant but intimate gathering space. She emailed her ideas to Jackson along with a preliminary budget, impressed but slightly intimidated by how quickly they'd progressed from venue crisis to comprehensive plan. She had just closed her laptop when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Kelly, it's Jackson. I got your email. Oh, she said, surprised to hear his voice. I wasn't expecting a call. Was something unclear in the proposal? No, it's perfect. Exactly what I envisioned but couldn't articulate. There was a pause. I'm actually calling because I need to reschedule our dinner tomorrow. Something's come up an issue with one of our ships in Singapore. I need to handle it personally. Kelly ignored the small twinge of disappointment. Of course, I understand. I'd like to reschedule if that's all right, maybe next week when things settle. Sure, she said, keeping her tone professional. Just let me know when you're free. After they hung up, Kelly scolded herself for feeling let down. This was precisely why getting involved with someone like Jackson would be complicated. His world operated on a different scale, with global emergencies and last-minute schedule changes. Her life was structured around client deadlines and local vendors, predictable in its own hectic way. The next morning, Kelly met with Mark and Deanne to review the rehearsal dinner plans. They were ecstatic about the venue and impressed with how quickly she'd pulled together a comprehensive proposal. "I still can't believe Jack offered the manor," Deanne said, examining the photographs Kelly had taken. "It's absolutely stunning." "You've known him longer than I have," Kelly said to Mark. "Has he always been this generous?" Mark considered the question. "Jack's always been generous with the people he cares about, but he's intensely private about his wealth. In college, nobody knew his family owned Xavier Maritime until our junior year when his picture appeared in some financial magazine. He was mortified." "That doesn't sound like the confident businessman I met," Kelly observed. "The confidence is real, but it's about competence, not money," Mark explained. "His father was old-school, tough, expected perfection, rarely gave praise. Jack worked twice as hard as anyone else to prove himself. When he took over the company, he completely restructured it, focusing on sustainable shipping practices and employee benefits. The money matters to him only as far as what he can do with it." Kelly digested this information, realizing how little she actually knew about Jackson beyond their brief interactions. "Well, he's been incredibly helpful with the rehearsal dinner. I just hope the shipping crisis he mentioned gets resolved soon." Mark's brow furrowed. "Shipping crisis?" "He didn't mention anything about that when we spoke yesterday. He called last night to reschedule our dinner because of some emergency with a ship in Singapore," Kelly explained. Mark and Deanne exchanged a look that Kelly couldn't interpret. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," Mark said too quickly. "I'm sure it's important if he had to cancel." Kelly narrowed her eyes. "You're a terrible liar. What aren't you telling me?" Mark sighed. "It's just, Jack doesn't typically cancel plans. He's almost obsessively reliable. If he rescheduled with you, it must be serious." Kelly felt a flutter of concern, though she told herself it was ridiculous to worry about a man she barely knew, particularly one with resources and connections, far beyond what most people could imagine. Still, throughout the rest of their meeting, she found herself checking her phone more often than necessary. 3 days passed without word from Jackson. Kelly threw herself into work, finalizing details for the rehearsal dinner and juggling her regular clients. On the 4th day, as she was leaving a meeting with a caterer, she nearly collided with someone on the sidewalk. "Kelly," she looked up to find Jackson standing before her, looking slightly haggard but smiling. The flutter in her stomach returned with unexpected force. "Jackson," she managed. "I wasn't expecting to see you. Is everything all right with your ship?" A shadow crossed his face. "It's complicated but manageable. I'm sorry about dinner." "Don't worry about it. These things happen." He studied her face as if searching for signs of resentment. "I'd still like to take you to dinner. Tonight, if you're free." Kelly hesitated. Part of her wanted to maintain professional distance, especially knowing how easily his world could intrude on any personal connection. But another part, the part that had spent 4 days thinking about him more than was reasonable, wanted to say yes. "I'm free," she said finally. Relief and pleasure brightened his expression. "Wonderful. 7 o'clock. 7 is perfect." This time, Jackson arrived exactly as promised, picking her up in a more subdued but still impressive Bentley. Kelly had deliberated longer than she cared to admit over her outfit, finally settling on a simple black dress that could pass for either business or pleasure. To her surprise, Jackson didn't take her to another upscale restaurant. Instead, they drove to a small Italian place in the North End, tucked away on a side street Kelly had never noticed despite living in Boston her entire life. "Antonio was my father's chef for years before opening this place," Jackson explained as they were warmly greeted by an older Italian man. "He makes the best carbonara in the city, possibly the country." They were shown to a table in a private corner where Jackson seemed to relax visibly. "I hope this is all right. I thought something quieter might be nice." "It's perfect," Kelly said, genuinely pleased. "I was half expecting another power restaurant with 3 forks I wouldn't know how to use." Jackson laughed, the sound rich and unguarded. "I get enough of those for business." Places like this where the food is honest, and nobody cares who you are or what you do. These are the restaurants I actually enjoy. As they settled in with glasses of wine, Kelly found herself wanting to know more about the man behind the polished exterior. Tell me something that's not in your professional bio. Jackson considered the question. I collect vintage nautical maps. My office in London is covered with them. Drives my assistant crazy because they're not precisely aligned. He leaned forward. Your turn. Something not in the Kelly Garrison event planner profile. I wanted to be a pastry chef before I fell into event planning, she admitted. I still stress bake at 2 a.m. when I'm working on a difficult project. My neighbors get a lot of midnight muffins. The conversation flowed easily from there. Kelly learned that Jackson spoke 4 languages, had a rescue dog named Captain living with his sister while he traveled, and preferred books to television. In turn, she told him about growing up in Boston with Mark, her brief stint in culinary school before discovering her talent for organization, and her dream of eventually expanding her business to include destination events. When Antonio brought their pasta himself, fussing over Jackson like a favorite nephew, Kelly caught a glimpse of a different side of him. The way he spoke Italian with the chef, asked about his grandchildren by name, and genuinely seemed interested in the answers. You're not what I expected, she said when Antonio had left with promises of special dessert. Jackson raised an eyebrow. What did you expect? I don't know, someone more. Arrogant, detached, those are the usual assumptions. Maybe, she admitted, but you're not like that at all. He twirled pasta thoughtfully. The shipping industry isn't known for its warm, fuzzy executives. When I took over, there were plenty of people waiting for me to fail the entitled son who hadn't earned his position. I learned to be reserved professionally because showing too much emotion was seen as weakness. And personally, a shadow crossed his face. I haven't had much of a personal life the past 5 years. Building the company into what I wanted it to be took everything I had. And now? Kelly asked, sensing something beneath his words. Now I'm beginning to wonder what I've been working for, he said quietly. Success is hollow when you have no one to share it with. The vulnerability in his voice touched something in Kelly. Before she could respond, Antonio returned with dessert, homemade tiramisu and 2 small glasses of limoncello. As the evening progressed, Kelly found herself reluctant for it to end. There was an ease to their conversation, a natural rhythm that made hours pass like minutes. When they finally left the restaurant, the night air was cool and clear, the streets of the North End still buzzing with energy. Would you like to walk for a bit? Jackson asked, gesturing toward the waterfront. It's a beautiful night. They strolled along the harbor, talking about everything and nothing: childhood memories, favorite travel destinations, the books they'd read recently. When Kelly shivered slightly in the breeze off the water, Jackson removed his jacket and draped it around her shoulders in a gesture so natural it felt as if they'd known each other for years rather than days. Thank you for tonight, Kelly said as they paused to look out at the water. I haven't enjoyed an evening like this in a long time. Jackson turned to face her, his expression serious. Neither have I. He hesitated, then added, Kelly, I should tell you something before this goes any further. Her heart quickened at the implication that there might be a further. What is it? The shipping emergency was real, but it wasn't the only reason I canceled our dinner. He looked uncomfortable. I was also nervous, Kelly couldn't hide her surprise, about having dinner with me. He ran a hand through his hair, a disarmingly human gesture from someone who typically appeared so composed. I haven't dated much since taking over the company. Most of the women I meet are either interested in what I can do for their careers or what my bank account can do for their lifestyles. He met her gaze directly. With you, it's different. You're Mark's sister, which already complicated things, and you're building your own business, making your own way. I didn't want to pressure you or make you uncomfortable. Kelly was touched by his honesty. I appreciate that. And for what it's worth, I was nervous too. You're intimidating, he laughed softly. Me, you're the one who can walk into an empty space and immediately transform it into something magical. That's a rare gift. It's just vision and logistics, Kelly demurred. What you do running a global company, making decisions that affect thousands of people, that's intimidating. It's just spreadsheets and strategy, he countered with a smile. See, we're both downplaying what we do. Kelly laughed, realizing he was right. Maybe we should both stop minimizing our accomplishments. Agreed. His smile faded into something more serious. Kelly, I know this is still new, but I'd like to see where it could go. I'll be in Boston for at least the next month overseeing the manor's completion. After that, I'll need to travel, but I'm considering making Boston my primary base again. The prospect of Jackson staying in Boston sent a thrill through Kelly that she couldn't ignore. I'd like that too, she said honestly, to see where this might go. The following weeks were a whirlwind of wedding preparations interspersed with stolen moments with Jackson. As the rehearsal dinner approached, they worked together to transform the manor's terrace into an enchanted garden setting. Kelly was impressed by how Jackson rolled up his sleeves alongside the contractors, moving furniture and helping hang string lights with zero pretension. Their relationship deepened with each passing day. Jackson invited Kelly to business dinners where she observed his leadership style, firsthand respectful but decisive, innovative but pragmatic. In turn, she brought him to client events where he marveled at her ability to anticipate problems before they arose and create seamless experiences that looked effortless, but required meticulous planning. They also carved out time that had nothing to do with work or the wedding quiet dinners at hole-in-the-wall restaurants Jackson discovered, afternoon walks through Boston's hidden parks, and long conversations that stretched into the night. Kelly learned about his complicated relationship with his father, his deep attachment to his younger sister, and his vision for transforming Xavier Maritime into a model of sustainable shipping. Jackson discovered Kelly's passion for historical architecture, her competitive streak in board games, and her dream of someday running a destination wedding business in wine country. The night before the rehearsal dinner, they were at the manor making final preparations when a sudden spring storm hit. Racing inside from the terrace, they found themselves laughing and soaked in the grand foyer. "We'll need to implement the rain contingency plan," Kelly said, wringing water from her hair. "Already on it," Jackson replied, typing on his phone. "The tent company is sending a crew first thing tomorrow." Kelly looked up at him, struck by how naturally they had fallen into working as a team. "You know, most men would have left all this wedding stuff to me." Jackson slipped his phone into his pocket and stepped closer. "Most men haven't had the privilege of watching you work. Your attention to detail, your creativity, the way you care about creating perfect moments for other people, it's extraordinary, Kelly." Her breath caught at the intensity in his eyes. "Jackson, I know it's only been a few weeks," he said softly, "but I've never felt this way about anyone. When I'm with you, all the parts of my life that seemed separate before work, family, personal goals, they all align. You make me want to be not just successful, but happy." Kelly felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I feel the same way. I was so focused on building my business, I didn't realize how much I'd closed myself off to other possibilities." Jackson brushed a damp strand of hair from her face. "I don't want to rush this, but I also don't want to pretend I'm not already falling in love with you." The word sent a shiver through Kelly that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, the truth of it washing over her with unexpected clarity. He drew her close, his kiss gentle at first, then deepening with a passion that left her breathless. Outside, the storm continued, but inside the manor, Kelly felt as though she had finally found shelter in the most unexpected place, the arms of her brother's millionaire best man. The rehearsal dinner the next evening was perfect, despite the lingering rain. The tent transformed the terrace into an intimate garden pavilion, with hundreds of twinkling lights reflecting off the raindrops that clung to the clear panels. Mark and Deanne's closest friends and family gathered to celebrate, the atmosphere warm with laughter and anticipation of the wedding to come. As Kelly watched Jackson deliver his best man toast heartfelt words about friendship and love that brought both laughter and tears, she marveled at how drastically her life had changed in just a few short weeks. What had begun as a desperate search for a venue had led to something she hadn't even realized she was missing. Later, as the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Jackson found Kelly in a quiet corner, checking items off her meticulous planning list. "I think we can officially call this a success," he said, slipping an arm around her waist. "Absolutely," she agreed, leaning into him. "Everything was perfect. You know," he said thoughtfully, "the manor has other potential uses besides a rehearsal dinner venue." Kelly looked up at him curiously. "Oh, it would make an excellent headquarters for an event planning business that specializes in exclusive private events. The renovated carriage house could serve as offices and design space, while the grounds could showcase what's possible for potential clients." Kelly's heart raced as she caught his meaning. "Jackson, are you suggesting I'm suggesting a business proposition?" he said, his eyes twinkling. "The manor needs a permanent resident who appreciates its potential. Xavier Maritime needs a Boston headquarters, and I need—" He paused, taking her hands in his. "I need a reason to call one place home. You could be that reason, Kelly." "Are you asking me to move in with you?" she asked, barely daring to believe what she was hearing. "Eventually, yes. But first, I'm asking if you'd consider a partnership, personal and professional. Your event planning expertise combined with my business resources could create something extraordinary." He squeezed her hands gently. "I know it's fast, but when you know something is right." Kelly thought about the man she'd come to know, not just the successful businessman, but the person who stayed up late helping her assemble welcome bags, who remembered how she liked her coffee, who listened to her ideas as if they were the most important things he'd ever heard. "Yes," she said simply, "to all of it. The business partnership, making the manor a home, being your reason to stay, yes." His smile was radiant as he pulled her close. "I came back to Boston expecting to attend my best friend's wedding. I never expected to fall in love with his sister. And I never expected that planning a rehearsal dinner would change my entire life," Kelly replied, stretching up to kiss him. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the gardens glistening under the moonlight, a fresh beginning, just like the one unfolding between them. 1 year later, Kelly stood in the same spot on the manor's terrace, now transformed into the headquarters of Garrison Xavier Events. The business had quickly become Boston's premier event planning company, with Kelly's creative vision and Jackson's business acumen proving a formidable combination. The manor itself had been fully restored, becoming not just their home and business headquarters, but also a showcase venue for their most exclusive events. Tonight, however, it was hosting a more personal celebration, their engagement party. As Kelly watched Jackson across the terrace, deep in conversation with her brother Mark and his now wife Deanne, she reflected on how a simple quest for a rehearsal dinner venue had led to the greatest partnership of her life. When Jackson caught her eye and smiled that same warm smile that had first captured her attention, Kelly knew that sometimes the most perfectly planned events were the ones you never saw coming.